Alright everyone, welcome to 2018. If you're a complete beginner to web development, or you've got some experience and want to know where you can go next, or you're an expert and looking for what's trending in 2018, this is the perfect video for you. We are going to take a look at the roadmap to becoming a web developer in 2018. Now, before we start, let me mention a few points. This roadmap by no means covers every technology out there in 2018. But having said that, it still covers a lot. You don't have to learn every technology that I will list. You can pick a path, either front-end or back-end. If you choose full stack, you can again pick a specific stack and focus only on that. Now, the options I've listed are based on some research, survey results, and my experience with some of the technologies. I'm pretty sure you guys might have some opinions as well. So if you feel there is something that I have missed, which is worth mentioning, leave a comment so that everyone else can know what that is. Alright then, let's get started, and I'm gonna begin with the front end. First, we all need to learn the basics: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML is what gives structure to your web page, and CSS takes care of the style and appearance. It doesn't matter if your web application is simple or complex. They all need HTML and CSS. They are the foundation to web development, and there is no alternative. Once you learn HTML and CSS, you can create static websites. So the next step is to learn JavaScript to add interactivity. With JavaScript, you can add or remove HTML, change styles. You can even listen to user events such as button clicks and perform some action. Now, once you master the basics of JavaScript, you can move on to Jquery. Jquery is a powerful JavaScript library that lets you do a lot with just a few lines of code. Now, if you notice, this path has an orange color. And that is because in 2018, it is not really required to learn Jquery. Don't get me wrong, it is great and a lot of companies still use it, but in 2018, this is not a necessity. So you can learn it out of your own interest. So once you master these basics, you dive deeper into CSS and JavaScript. Let's take a look at CSS first. When it comes to CSS frameworks, there is Bootstrap, Bulma, Foundation, and Materialize. They all are pretty great, but my personal recommendation is Bootstrap. Bootstrap 4 stable release should be out anytime soon, and I would definitely recommend getting started with that. It is built on top of Flexbox and has a huge community behind it, so definitely a good choice. Next, we have the preprocessors. Basically, the preprocessors allow you to include variables, operators, functions, mixins, and so on with your regular CSS. That is then compiled down to the CSS that the browsers can understand. If you are building complex projects, then start using preprocessors. A couple of options again. We have Sass, Less, Stylus, and Post CSS. I recommend going with Sass or SCSS to be more precise. Then there is layout. We have Flexbox and CSS Grid. The layout modules aim at providing a more efficient way to lay out, align, and distribute the space among the elements in a container, even when their size is unknown or can keep changing. Now, I recommend you get started with Flexbox because this also complements learning Bootstrap 4, and Flexbox is pretty suitable for small components in your application. For building large layouts, you can start using CSS Grid. And finally, we have methodologies. Now, CSS methodologies are structured ways of writing and organizing your CSS and HTML. If there are multiple people in a team working on a project, it's always a good idea to adopt a standard convention for writing HTML and CSS. So there is scalable and modular architecture for CSS, block element modifier, and object-oriented CSS. A couple more options out there, but I have listed these three because they're kind of popular. I have no personal recommendation here because it completely depends on the type of project you work on. But I can say that BEM is probably the more strict of the three. So that is about CSS. Now let's talk about JavaScript. Once you learn the basics of JavaScript, you really must learn ES 2015, also known as ES6. ES 2015 is, if I can call it, modern JavaScript. So it's the JavaScript we know, plus a whole lot of new awesome features. I highly recommend you start using this in 2018. Of course, all browsers fully don't understand ES 2015 yet. So you need to transpile ES 2015 to the JavaScript we know using something like Babel. And once you have a good understanding of ES 2015, you can move on to TypeScript. TypeScript is from Microsoft, and it is basically a typed superset of JavaScript that again compiles down to plain JavaScript. So TypeScript has all the features you see in ES 2015 plus features from ES 2016 such as decorators, for example. It also provides optional static type checking, which is really helpful. So definitely get started with ES 2015 and then, if possible, move on to TypeScript. If you want to learn Angular, however, TypeScript is sort of a necessity. Next come task runners. There are a lot of tasks involved with creating and deploying a front-end application. Tasks like watching file changes, compiling, minifying files, and linting JavaScript. So there are tools that take care of this. Tools like Gulp and Grunt. If I had to pick one, I would pick Gulp, but heading into 2018, I would say you might not even require it. A lot of the things you can just as well do with NPM scripts. But again, Gulp is probably in use in a lot of companies right now, so you can definitely learn that as well. Then we have the package managers that let you manage the project dependencies. NPM is probably the most used package manager, but Yarn is rapidly becoming popular and is supposed to be a lot faster than NPM. So I would say get a good understanding of both of them. Next come the JavaScript frameworks. Now let me tell you, there are a lot more frameworks than the ones I have mentioned here, but heading into 2018, Angular, React, and Vue.js are pretty much dominating. So I could not think of a reason why you might want to consider a framework other than these three. Out of the three, I would say go with React or Vue.js. And the reason being, the learning curve for Angular is much more steep compared to the other two. Don't get me wrong, Angular is really powerful, but I would recommend learning Angular after you've learned either React or Vue. And a plus point with Vue is you can use plain JavaScript or ES5, and it is also a progressive framework. So you can use Vue on only some parts of your application, or even build an entire application from scratch. So these are some of the options for frameworks. Next, we have module loader or bundlers. Now, when you create your application, you probably divide the application into modules and organize those modules into different files and folders. Each of those files has to be included in your main HTML file in a script tag, which is then loaded by the browser. Having separate references is obviously going to take a toll on your page load time. So to get around this, we bundle all our files into one big file or fewer separate files and then reference them. For this purpose, we use tools like Webpack or Browserify. I would recommend learning Webpack because it has a few more good features. Next, a quick note on testing. When it comes to testing, you can pick Mocha, Jasmine, or Karma based on the way you want to test your application. And a few more things on the front end. Learn about Ajax or Fetch API for asynchronous functionality. There is Chart.js or D3.js for data visualization. So if you want to build charts, let's say for analytics or a dashboard, then you can pick one of these. After mastering the basics, start learning design patterns. And finally, get a good hold of using the browser developer tools. I would personally recommend using Chrome and learning the Chrome developer tools because this will accelerate your debugging process and you will get a better understanding of the code you write as you debug. You can also get a good understanding of your page performance. Alright, so that is about the front end. Now let's take a look at the back end. I would say that backend is a different animal altogether. There is just so much going on and they all are great in their own way. So let's begin with the scripting languages. These are basically languages that don't need to be compiled. You've got Python, Node.js, Ruby, and PHP. For each of them, I've listed the package manager that you need to be aware of and also a framework that you can get started with. For Python, you have pip package manager and frameworks like Django and Flask. Node.js, you have npm package manager and Express framework to get you started. Similarly, RubyGems package manager for Ruby and frameworks like Ruby on Rails and Sinatra. PHP, you have Composer for package management and frameworks like Laravel, Symfony, and CakePHP. You can probably get started with Node.js because you might already know JavaScript, which you use for front end, so just start using the same for backend as well. Node.js was also one of the commonly used technologies in 2017, and I'm pretty sure the same trend is going to carry forward to 2018. Next, we have the compiled languages. C# and Java have been in use for quite a while now, and you can find a lot of companies that use C# or Java. You also have Go and Rust. Rust was in fact the most loved programming language in 2017 according to the Stack Overflow survey. So people who started using Rust wanted to continue using Rust. So that's a good option to consider as well. Now we come to the data in the backend. And let's start with storage. First, we have the traditional RDBMS. So in relational database, the data is stored in tables that contain rows and columns. The tables may or may not have relation between them to link the data. A couple of options here: Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, Postgres, and MariaDB. Out of these, MySQL is probably the most popular one and something you can pick as your first database as well. But then again, certain databases go well with certain technologies. For example, if you're working with .NET, you can make use of Microsoft SQL Server. For PHP, you can use MySQL, and so on. Then we also have the NoSQL databases, where the data is not stored in tables, but rather as documents. A lot of advantages when it comes to NoSQL databases. There is no fixed schema, so you can store different types of data in the same collection. Easy to scale. There is no need of joins like you find in RDBMS, and a lot more. You've got MongoDB, Cassandra, Firebase, which is a cloud database that has become really popular. If you start with Node.js, then definitely go with a NoSQL database. MongoDB, for example, goes really well with Node.js. And you can also take a look at Firebase. It provides a lot more than just data storage. And then on caching, we have Redis and Memcached. And search engines, we have Solr and Elasticsearch. Again, these are something to consider only after you've made some good progress with the basics. And a few more things on the backend. Take a look at web servers. Nginx or Apache are pretty good. Learn how to test the code you write. Depending on the language you choose, learn how to test your code. You can learn things like NUnit, PHPUnit, PyUnit, Mocha, and so on. Learn how to handle security and authorization. Learn about authentication with OAuth 2 or JSON Web Token. Learn how to create RESTful APIs with the language or framework you choose. Optionally, you can also learn GraphQL, which is an alternate to REST APIs. So instead of making multiple requests, GraphQL allows you to make a single request to get all the data you want. Learn about the different programming principles. Do not repeat yourself. You aren't gonna need it. Keep it simple, stupid. And of course, the solid principles. They definitely impact the way you write your code. Also learn about design patterns. For example, the gang of 4 design patterns which are very popular. You can also take a look at Docker, which helps you automate the deployment of applications and a lot more. Well, that is about the backend. Finally, we come to mobile applications. Some of you might already know, but for others who don't, let me tell you, we can develop mobile applications using web technologies. So once you get pretty comfortable with a web technology, you can start building mobile applications as well. First, we have Ionic that lets you build hybrid mobile applications. So it's just a web application that runs in a mobile environment using Cordova. This uses Angular. So once you have a good understanding of Angular, you can take a look into Ionic. Next, we have React Native, which is a framework that makes use of React to build native mobile applications. We also have Nativescript, which again is used to build native mobile applications. Xamarin from Microsoft, which lets you build cross-platform mobile applications. Finally, we have progressive web apps, something a lot of people are excited about. Progressive web apps are regular websites which can appear to the user like native mobile applications. There are things like service workers, which allow you to use a website when there is poor or no network connectivity. You can also improve user engagement with push notifications. The users can just keep the applications they find useful on the home screen. There is no need to install them from the App Store. A lot more features, but I'll leave it to you to research. But definitely, heading into 2018, get an idea about PWAs. Finally, a couple of things that you should know irrespective of the path you take. Learn to use Git for version control, basic terminal usage, SSH, FTP, and also web hosting. Try to build a simple website, maybe your own portfolio, and then host it on the web. Learn about HTTP and HTTPS. Get familiar with a good text editor. And by that, I mean installing all the extensions or plugins that can really accelerate your development time. I would recommend Visual Studio Code. Finally, make sure to learn about JSON. You're going to use it in front end, in the back end. JSON is basically everywhere. It isn't something hard to learn, so just spend a day or two and make yourself familiar with JSON. Well, with that, we come to the end of our roadmap. Two things I've left out. First one, CMS. Content management, you can go with WordPress, which is pretty popular. And the second thing is DevOps. Now, DevOps is where you need to learn so many technologies, and if I put it all out here, it can be quite intimidating. So I want to leave DevOps to those who really are interested in taking that path. Get good with some of the things mentioned here, and then research about DevOps. Alright, so that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. Again, if you guys think I've left out something, make sure to leave a comment. Also, let me know in the comment section what tutorials are you expecting to see in 2018. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a big thumbs up if you found it helpful. I wish you all good luck for the year 2018.